when you join a league, a lot of times when it's formed online, you don't really know what you're getting into until you're like at least a few weeks in or maybe till the end of the season. I use the comparison of Airbnb, right? Would you stay in a 2-star Airbnb? No, right? Would you join a 2-star league? No, you wouldn't. But you don't know what a 2-star league looks like.
Hello and welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Under the Hoodie. I am Scott Hoyt, the host of Under the Hoodie and founder of Fantasy Sports Strategies, which also produces this show. I've been playing fantasy football for over 35 years or so. And one of the things that has always struck me during the years is how innovation has impacted our industry. If you think about when I first started playing fantasy football, it was an industry that maybe had 200,000 to 300,000 players. Today, we have 60 million people doing fantasy sports. And so one of the things that I love about fantasy sport in the fantasy sports industry is that there are still people out there looking at long-standing problems and asking, why are we still doing it this way? So innovation is still a critical piece of what we do going forward. And for years, commissioners and fantasy players have always had to juggle league chats, payment platforms, the league hosting sites challenges they have, social media groups, and that's just to keep their league running smoothly. While it's become part of the experience, but maybe it doesn't have to be this way. And today's guest is someone working to simplify that entire ecosystem. He is also a longtime fantasy football player. He's also a commissioner. He's an entrepreneur, and he's the founder of a platform focused on league creation, dues management, and a big one here, players' trust. And then maybe the most important part is helping fantasy players connect in more of a streamlined way. His vision is ambitious. He's creating a trusted marketplace, which, as we all know, is very critical in this industry that we all play in, where great leagues and great players can find each other. And maybe the most important of all is build lasting communities. I'm excited to learn more about his journey, the challenges he's trying to solve, and where does he see the fantasy sports industry heading next. So please welcome to Under the Hoodie, the founder of FanCred, Arman Reyes. Arman, welcome.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on. What an intro. Happy to be here and excited to chat.
Hey, one of the things that I always like to do with my guests is to, as opposed to looking forward, and we're going to do a lot of that here today, but I always like to look back. And for the people who don't know your story and don't know how you came to be where you are today, can you just kind of tell people what first got you into fantasy sports and how you got to where you are today?
Oh man, I think fantasy sports came later. The love for sports comes first. I think that's the case for most people.
Yeah.
If I have to think back, it's probably back when I was a kid. My first love is basketball, and I think that started after I had watched Space Jam. The movie with Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan, and I just became obsessed with basketball at that point. And, the Jordan years with the Bulls. I fell in love with the Phoenix Suns.
So we have something in common. I'm a huge Suns fan. Suns fan.
Yes. It's been a big part of my life, basketball. I played in the city leagues. I was never quite good enough to make it as a short Asian kid. Maybe yes, I did make it my freshman year of high school to play on the basketball team, but that bench kept pretty warm by me. So I played basketball a lot, fell in love, followed the NBA so closely. But when I look back, I also realized there was so many other sports I just played in. I did taekwondo, volleyball is like my main playing sport. And then I tried out for football, lasted a week, and was like, it's not for me. I tried out for baseball, like literally any sport I was doing. I did taekwondo and competed in the Junior Olympics. So just throughout my life, sports has been a huge part of it. And in high school is when someone approached me about, hey, you want to join a fantasy football league? And I was like, sure, why not? I like sports. I like football. Let me check it out. And um, a friend of mine, it was a friend of mine, Saman, in high school, and he ran like a 2 quarterback league on Yahoo. And I think the stats didn't automatically update at that time. It's a luxury we have now. We don't even think about, but it was cool just doing the draft and seeing the points and competing. I was instantly just hooked from there.
So, was there any point during this, obviously, this love of sports and then playing fantasy sports yourself? Was there any point during that experience that you realized, hey, there's a real business opportunity within this ecosystem that we're playing? At what point did that occur?
Oh, not till much later in life. I, went to University of Arizona, which is, your rival. I know that.
Oh
We talked at the
no, we've
conference.
gone from being a Suns fan to now I got to deal with that.
Yeah, yeah. Deep
You're lucky
rivalry
I didn't
there.
wear my ASU hat on today. A lot of times I wear it.
Yeah. But I studied computer science, became a software engineer, and been through a lot of different companies. I did compliance at Microsoft. I did finance at a finance company here in the area, and then I worked for Disney, Disney streaming, big media company. And it wasn't until last maybe last year where uh, honestly, I was just bored at work. And I was like, what do I really love to do? It sort of became that, like, I've been in corporate for a while, and I really thought about the question, what would I rather be doing? If I didn't have to worry about supporting my family. And it always came down to fantasy sports. And so I thought about my own problems in the space. What about fantasy sports do I think can be solved? What's a problem out there that I face? And it came down to my leagues that I commission. I realized I have leagues online that I've created online and met people online. There's one 32-team league that I run, and
Wow.
that one took years to get the right group of people. Maybe like 3 or 4. There was always people that were like just not the right fit, whether they were just, toxic in nature or not responsive. I mean, not responsive is fine. I think it's not ideal, but it's crazy how many times I ran into players that just wanted to tear down the league through being negative. And I kept going back to that as like, how do I solve that problem? Right. Once I saw that, I was like, there's got to be something here. And so I looked into it more, and now today I'm still going at it, trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, we're going to talk about FanCred here in a second and kind of how you built that. But, one of the things I always ask, and this will probably lead us up to that conversation, is that it always seems to me that as a founder of a company like yourself, of what you're building, there's always that special moment, or that what I call the aha moment, that said, okay, this is going to lead to the creation of X. And in your case, the creation of FanCred. What was your aha? I mean, you talked about kind of the frustrations you had with being a commissioner, but was there an aha moment that said, okay, I'm going to find a better way?
Um, the aha moment, I would say, I was driving back from a volleyball game that I played in, and I listened to Planet Money, which is a podcast, and it talked about it was a woman who started a bank. I think it's called Fortuna Bank, specifically for women entrepreneurs. And it was an interesting story, and I just thought about, how does one start a bank? It just seems so heavily regulated. Seems like a monumental task, but she was able to do it specifically around a community that she loves and supports. And so when I got home, I had been thinking about this idea of creating competing in the trusted payment space in for fantasy leagues. And that I think that story really moved me in terms of like, it may seem really difficult, but this person just went ahead and did it one step at a time. And so that gave me I guess, the belief that I could do something similar. And so I started just working away and, you know, just committing to really trying to solve the whole, you know, trust issues in fantasy sports,
Yeah,
starting
we're
with the
gonna we're
payment
gonna talk
side.
about that here in a second because I think that's a for me everything I've known about what you're doing is really trust is one of the biggest adjectives that I would describe what you're trying to accomplish here and building community. So let's talk a little bit about building FanCred if we could. How would you describe? I mean, if somebody who doesn't really know much about you or haven't heard about who you are, and they're hearing for it for the first time, how would you describe FanCred to somebody for the first time?
FanCred is short for fantasy credibility, right? Um, we aim to be a platform that makes that more transparent. Like I mentioned earlier, when you join a league, a lot of times when it's formed online, you don't really know what you're getting into until you're like at least a few weeks in or maybe till the end of the season. And I've seen a lot of leagues falter because of that. People join for 1 year and it's not what they had hoped for. There were people they didn't get along with. And so that's FanCred's mission, is to make that more obvious. I use the comparison of Airbnb, right? Would you stay in a 2-star Airbnb? No, right? Would you join a 2-star league? No, you wouldn't. But you don't know what a 2-star league looks like. There's no obvious thing there. And so that's the mission of FanCred, is to really make that obvious and have a better way for the fantasy community online to connect.
Yeah, and it seems like trust is as I said a few minutes ago, is that it's a major cornerstone of what you're doing. It's certainly a major theme behind your platform. Why was that such an important focus from day one? And I know you've talked about it here briefly, but if you can expand upon that, it would be great.
Yeah, at first I focus on the payment side, right? I think that story of it, the podcast, and seeing that there's players in the space, I thought there could be improvement on that side. But as I talked to users, as I really dove into the community and seeing what their problems are, I heard a lot of similar stories about, I always have to find more league mates and things don't work out. And diving into the community really helped me see that I'm not the only one with this problem. And so I started expanding my vision for what I was building, and I think we're still, I'm still really building towards that. It's such a big task, right? To really basically get all the data in place to make people feel comfortable making decisions, or even to trust it. So it's a long journey. There's a lot of stuff to do, but I'm committed to the mission. I feel like it's a solvable problem. So like, yeah, I hope we get there.
Yeah, and I'm a commissioner of 3 leagues myself. 2 of them are, well, I'd say all 3 of them are what I would call friends and family type of leagues. But that being said, there's still challenges as a commissioner with everything from collecting league dues and payments. It's always been a challenge for commissioners. How does, in your vision, how does FanCred improve that experience?
Yeah. When you want to play in an online league, a lot of the searching, it's a very fragmented experience. You'll be going to Reddit, you'll be going to Facebook groups, Discord chats, and just putting your league out there. You're copying and pasting the league description, and then you're chatting with a bunch of different people with all you know is their username on Reddit. You have no idea how they're like as a fantasy player. And I think the bar right now is like, if they're willing to pay, they get to play. And so uh, FanCred aims to kind of centralize that and not make it such a fragmented experience. And I think the way to really make people believe that FanCred is the destination for this is that trust factor, right? Yeah. I think once people start seeing, oh, I don't have to have this weird ambiguous feeling in my gut that the person that is paying is actually a good league mate. I can see it right there. And so trust is the central part of FanCred, as you have mentioned. And then everything around it, you can build. You can build hosting a league. You can build, hey, I'm looking for a league. There's just a lot of directions it can go. And right now you can post your league and people can join it. You can look at people's profiles and check out, what is their league mate rating? What is their commissioner rating? And that's visible in FanCred. And I hope that drives more people to use the site to find each other rather than going through those really fragmented experiences.
Yeah, and I would imagine that during the course you've had surprises, good, bad, or indifferent. Is there what has maybe surprised you the most since you've launched this?
Oh, what has surprised me the most? I would say more of on a positive note, how welcoming the fantasy community is. I'm pitching to them like, oh, here's this platform, try it out. Happy to join your podcast or, see what your league is about. And a lot of the fantasy community is very welcoming. It's been surprising how welcoming is, especially to a new person, really going deep into the fantasy community. And so I really appreciate that. I've been surprised with how much support I've gotten from a lot of folks, like, shout out to, Devi Dojo, Fourth and Fantasy. I know a lot of the people from there that run their own podcasts and do content creation. They've just been major supporters since I've reached out to them. And the fantasy goats as well, or Ron, a particular person there, has just, he embodies exactly what I believe commissioners online should be like, that they do it for the love of the game. And so it's been such a surprise just how connected I've gotten with the fantasy community. I didn't know how many relationships I'd be building when doing this kind of business, but man, it's been a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that community piece here in a second, and because I think that's such a critical piece in this industry, and building community is really what it's all about. That's why this community rallies around companies like yourself, because it is building a community. I want to step back. One last thing about FanCred, because this is always, as a marketing guy, as a branding guy, this is always a fun question to ask. Where and how did you come up with the name?
It's funny you ask. I was coming up with a lot of names, and the original name was actually Fan Bank, because I was like, Fantasy Bank, yeah, that's kind of, from the podcast, right? Oh, I want to start a bank. And I quickly realized having a bank in your name opens you up to a ton of scrutiny that is unwanted. So it's like, I'm not a bank. A fan bank's probably not good. I actually had bought the domain name fanbank.app. So that's how far I went with it until I learned that's probably not the way to go. So then I was just trying variations of fan, and then I saw FanCred used to be a company around social media. It was a niche social media website focused around sports. And, it's defunct now, but they had basically the idea that I want to instill in fantasy sports. They had like a little FanCred score of like, oh, this person is, this is their FanCred. This is based on their social media posts, their takes and whatnot. And I had already thought that in my head of like what this should be. And I was like, huh, they seem to have raised, $3 million back in the day. Well, this is a good name. So it FanCred, luckily it was, not taken, and it just made sense, like fantasy credibility. Once I saw FanCred, I was like, immediately I thought fantasy credibility. That's perfect. So bought the domain name, got the trademarks, and FanCred is such a perfect name for the business.
Yeah, it is. It's as a marketing guy, I love it. I love the name. I love the I love the stories behind the names, and each story is very unique and very different. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, because I think you're very embedded in the industry and certainly all about building community. And I think that's really important. And this industry, as we know, continues to grow every year. In fact, I heard this stat 2 days ago. Didn't even know this stat. When I started playing in 1989, there were about 200,000 fantasy players. Today, it's 60 million. That is a tremendous amount of growth. So there are all kinds of opportunities that exist. What, in your mind, and believe me, there's all kinds of things that are happening as we speak, but what do you think are the biggest opportunities that still exist in this industry?
Oh, still exists. There's a ton of people I met at the FSGA, and they're tackling a lot of different problems or innovating new ways to play fantasy. So that, to me, is proof that there's just a lot of opportunity, a lot of things to look at. I met Steve from Front Office Pros, and they're about to launch their contract leagues. I loved playing Madden as a kid, and the best part was just franchise mode. I'd be playing by myself, running through 25 years of managing a team, and winning like 6 Super Bowls along the way. But the whole contracts negotiation part, that's an underserved market, I think. And I know there's a few companies out there that are launching and solving or serving that market, and I'd be a part of that. I think that's such a cool thing to really feel more like a GM, which at the end of the day, when you're playing fantasy, that's what you feel like. So getting more and closer, I think that's a good opportunity that's out there. That's the one that sticks out of my head, but there's probably a lot, like different formats, different ways to play. I always like looking at those. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think technology is going to play a role as we move forward. It already is, with between AI and all the other innovative things that are out there. That's always going to have an impact in this industry, and so I'm sure that will, in some form or fashion, impact you as well, good, bad, and indifferent. So, your whole thing is about helping commissioners, I think, for the most part. And as a commissioner myself, I play on several different platforms, and I do have frustrations. Is there any that these existing platforms aren't providing that you're hearing from commissioners say, I need this badly?
Yeah, actually, when I talk to people that are actually like play or that have worked for certain platforms like Yahoo and Sleeper, a lot of customer support requests that they told me like are just bad actors in leagues. That, to me, kind of, when I heard of that and I had already been started working on that problem, it just made me feel like, oh, this is a bigger problem than I thought. I think, sorry, I forgot the question again.
No, it's just, I mean, these platforms, every platform has their own unique way of having you navigate through what they want you to navigate through. And in some cases, there's some things that are missing that they're not providing that I would like to have. I mean, I could tell you on ESPN, there's some things I don't like their draft board, although they're getting better on their draft board. And so there are things out there that I think platforms aren't providing that I think there are opportunities. I just want to kind of get your take on that. That's all.
Yeah, I think Sleeper does a good job. I mainly use them. I don't think I have any other leagues that are outside of Sleeper now. They have all moved. They serve the dynasty experience really well, which is what most of my leagues are now. But it really is like, I think, you mentioned there's like over 60 million fantasy players now, and that's just a bunch of different tastes. And so that's going to lead to, different desires, different needs. I think, what I'm trying to do with FanCred is what's lacking in all these fantasy platforms, is being able to find more leagues to join, right? Like, your average player plays in the home league, and they have one league and it's managed by one guy, and that's good for most people. But for people like me and you who play in multiple leagues, just love the game so much. I think all the platforms lack a way to form leagues online that are of quality. And
Yeah.
so, I think every platform has that gap. Um, Most platforms just say, here, you can create a room and you can have people join it, and then you take it from there. You vet them, you communicate with them. None of the platforms have any sort of information on like, is this a quality fantasy player? Do these fantasy personalities line up? Right? Fantasy players are so different, especially in the league chat, where you have the one guy that's like the meme clown, just dropping memes. You've got your Adam Schefter types that are just dropping breaking news in the league chat so people can talk about it. And then you have the analytics guy that's just like, oh, this is why Justin Jefferson's not a good bet this year. And so it's like, there are different personas in fantasy. And if you have, too much of one, it might not be as engaged a league. And so, I think all platforms probably have an incentive to better connect the fantasy community online, right? It just makes it easier to want to play in more and more leagues. And, I want to help be part of that solution.
So, and speaking of part of that solution, and you made this comment earlier, and it's something that I noticed when I was kind of putting together what I want to talk to Arman about today. And one of the things I want to really talk about is you creating an Airbnb for fantasy sports. And you talked about the experience of, would you go to an Airbnb that's rated 2.9? No, you would not. So how do you then now take that same ranking metrics or scoring system and attach it to these leagues? So let's say I'm looking for a league to join, and I look online and I go, this has got a 4.9 rating and it's been rated by 42 people. That's pretty good. So is that a vision that you have that you want to create now, or 3, 4, 5 years down the road?
Yeah. So what is a league, right? A league is comprised of its commissioner, which is a very, important part of how a league actually is run and how it feels. And the second part are the members that comprise the league. And so the ratings for a league are sort of derived from the ratings that these individual players in the league and their commissioner have. And right now in FanCred, every user has 2 separate ratings. You have a commissioner rating and you have a league member rating, because they're very different roles. And so when you join a league, you can look at each individual member and see these ratings. And how are these ratings, made? So every season, right after the season, because that's when you know like how this person is in the league, after the payouts are performed, you'll be showed like, oh, let's rate some members. Rate your commissioner. How did they do on a scale, on a 3-point scale? Here, write some comments here on your commissioner. And then same with league mates. You can rate them on their engagement. You rate them on their fantasy IQ. And you can also leave comments on how that league member was. And so we actually use AI to summarize those comments. And so every league member will have a summary of what all that has been said about them using AI. And so you can look at that in their profile. And that, I think, will start solving the problem of like, okay, I join a league and I can look and I can see what people have said about this player. I can see their league mate rating. I can see their commissioner rating if they are the commissioner of this league. And so altogether, I think that transparency and visibility will help people feel more comfortable joining leagues.
I think it's a perfect marketing tool. I think it's a great marketing tool, especially if you want to build credibility of these leagues. And I think that's remarkable. So I'm going to pivot a little bit because I know how challenging it can be in what I call the startup life as an entrepreneur and startups. And I've had my own set of experiences that over the years. And I know you've talked a little bit about yours, but I always like to understand from your perspective, what has been the toughest challenge of building a startup, especially in this space that we play in called fantasy sports?
Oh, the toughest challenge, man. I've got a couple. Ones that one I knew was going to be an issue. The other one, not so much. I'll start with the one that I didn't think would be so much of an issue. It's like it's such a heavily regulated space that we're in, and so I'm continuously making sure I'm up to date on compliance and legal things that need consideration for the business. And I've learned over the year that I've been building this, there's a lot that goes into managing fantasy payments. And so that has been quite on the mind, top of mind as I build this business to be, as resilient as possible. So that I would say is the toughest business related one. The other one is it actually is pretty lonely. I'm gonna be real here. It is as a founder, a solo founder in this business. A lot of people don't do this for they don't. It takes a little bit of delusion to think you can change the fantasy world, or let alone or change. It takes a lot of delusion to change the world, let alone just the fantasy community, right? So when I talk to friends, they can't relate. They're not building their own business. They're just they're happy in their jobs, and I'm like, oh, I'm really trying here, but I don't want to bore you to death with this. And so it's been hard finding the right community, and I'm still like looking for that. And I have some some Seattle meetups with founders and trying to find that right community around that. I think that hasn't been as obvious to me because I was just like, oh, I think this is a fun thing to do. And then once you're in it and you feel the problems of building a business and the challenges, it's like, oh wow, I don't have anyone to talk to. In a regular job, you have plenty of people to talk to. People can empathize, but when you're starting your own thing, especially in a very niche space like fantasy, it can get lonely. So yeah, that's an issue that I'm also trying to figure out too.
But I would imagine that even though you're building this, as an entrepreneur or solopreneur, however you want to describe it, you have to balance listening to your user feedback while still staying very committed to what you consider your long-term vision. How do you do that?
Yeah, a lot of my user listening has been through cold outreach. So I do cold outreach, and a lot of times people don't want to hear it. But the people that do give feedback, and the people that are on the platform and give great feedback, it's sort of like that athlete mentality, right? You don't want to get too high, you don't want to get too low. Take the feedback as it is. Use your intuition a little bit about, I think some of the advice that I hear from, TED Talks or other founders that have spoken, it's like, you are the expert at your business. Like, trust your gut a lot. Listen to feedback, but never let that be like such a deciding, like, driving force, right? The feedback altogether, right, can help inform your business sense, but it is a balance of like using the user feedback to help fine tune your intuition, I guess. So yeah, that is quite a exercise that you don't, that non-entrepreneurs don't have. So it's been a learning experience, and I continue to talk to more users, even just non-users, right? People that are just in the fantasy community. I think it's important to listen to what they're excited about as well, even if it doesn't directly relate to FanCred itself. It's part of that overall community that is important to keep in touch with. So I take it all in. I'm having a lot of fun right? It's important to be energized by the work that you do and being part of the community. But yeah, it is quite a new skill that I'm learning as a new entrepreneur to
Well, and I
balance
think,
all the
yeah,
feedback.
and I think, as an entrepreneur, everybody wants to hear, well, what advice would you give me if I was starting up a company? But I think you've already talked about what that is, which I believe is listening to other founders with some of the same level of challenges that they have, and being able to collaborate and certainly kind of feel what their pain is, and vice versa, and you learn from that. And so I think listening today and building a business within our industry, it's all about building that community of trust with other founders who can help give you whatever advice that maybe you didn't have from the beginning. And I suspect then you can pass that advice on to new entrepreneurs. And I think it's a great quality to have. And I applaud you for trying to reach out to other, founders, and especially in the Seattle area. And frankly, you've got it in the industry too, through your association with FSGA. And I think that's always a positive thing too. What I want to do before we conclude here today is I want to kind of look ahead. I want to look ahead just a little bit. And so I'm not going to ask you to give me any secrets here or anything like that, but what features or developments are you most excited about FanCred over the next 12, maybe 6 to 12, 9 months? What's happening?
Well, we just launched a message board feature, which is, where you can post very important information. I think going back to the feedback question, that was feedback that I heard more consistently. And my gut did tell me, like, not every platform is like Sleeper where you have a chat and most people are handling it through there. And so I use my intuition to just be like, oh yeah, that's a priority. I've lost users over that. And so that feature is new. You can communicate within the platform on the message board. Feature wise, there's a review system that's out there that's more tied towards your specific platform and username. So not just your own FanCred account. You can get into reviewing people that aren't on FanCred, but maybe you've had interactions with, and they haven't joined FanCred. Like my sleeper name is Commissioner. So if people, have had hopefully nothing but good experiences with Commissioner, they'll go in and rate that specific platform and username. That's one of the features that I hope will help add to the fantasy credibility metrics as we collect more of that. One of the biggest things that I'm excited about is just getting more users on the platform, having them try out the newer features that weren't in last season. Some of the newer features are automated payouts, where we'll pull your sleeper league data, and based on how you identified the payouts at the beginning of the year, you just click a button and it'll do it for you. So you don't have to do any of that manual calculation or distribution yourself. So there's a few leagues that have joined that, and I'm excited to see how that works, and we'll be ready to support it if there's issues. So yeah, a lot of exciting things, and more to build, more payment options. That's sort of my focus right now is that side. So
how can our listeners go to learn more, provide feedback, become part of the FanCred community? Tell people, and I know you got a new podcast. Talk about that as well.
Yeah, go to fancred.app. Check it out. There's a lot of information on how it works and what we're about. All the social medias are on the bottom of the page. So we're on YouTube, we're on X, Instagram, and others. But like you mentioned, we also have the Credible Commish podcast that has been running for a few weeks now, and there's always room for more guests. It's been fun just talking about commissioners. Like, commissioners don't get enough credit all the time. There's not a lot of thank yous for commissioners. And so this is my ode to commissioners, the specific people that FanCred is built for.
Yeah, it's not a high paying job. It's not a high paying job.
No, it's a job out of passion, right?
It sure is.
And so, we highlight, what's your story? How did you get into football? How did you get into fantasy football? What led you to be commissioner? What are some issues you faced? And, what are some fun stories about your league? And it's just a good time, a good conversation, and people have had fun. Maybe we'll get you on there one day.
Love
Be
to come
happy
on.
to have you. Yeah.
Anytime.
And yeah, so you can check that out on the FanCred YouTube channel. But definitely going to get into even more fun content during this season. So look forward to different kinds of content FanCred's going to put out.
Will I see you at the Expo, or will I see you in Philly at the FSGA in July?
You will see me at the Expo. It was hard to swing two travel trips in a month with the 3 kids. I have to pick and choose certain times, but excited for that.
If you want my opinion between the two, I hope, I sit on the board now, the FSGA, so I got to be careful how I say this, but the Expo is a heck of a lot more fun.
Oh yeah. I've never been. It'll be my first time in Canton. I'll be the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm excited for.
It's very cool. You'll love it. It's a great experience, and Bob Lung does, and the group, they do a great job, and it's just a lot of fun. Are you staying at the DoubleTree by any chance?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Perfect spot to stay, because that's everyone ends up sitting at the bar. That's where all the best fun and networking happens, is at that bar. So
it's awesome. I'll have to buy you a drink when we're there. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, Arman, this is a fantastic conversation. I think what stands out to me, and always has in talking to you, that FanCred just isn't trying to create another fantasy tool. It's really trying to solve some of the biggest pain points that commissioners and league members experience and have dealt with for years. And I think I'm truly appreciative of what you're trying to accomplish in that vision. And I think you've built a community built on trust, which I think is very important in our industry. So I thank you for sharing your story. Your journey and entrepreneurship is not easy, and the vision that you have behind FanCred. I've heard the story a few times. Never gets old for me. I love hearing all about it. And to everyone listening, make sure you check out FanCred and follow along as they continue to build these tools for fantasy players and commissioners alike, like myself. And so, but before we conclude, I do this with every guest. It's only one last question. What is your, and I think I already know this because I think you mentioned it earlier. What is your favorite sports movie?
I mean, Space Jam did start it all, but as far as its rewatchability, it's not up there. Like, I would say, honestly, the one that keeps coming up in my head is Moneyball, because it'll be on YouTube the whole time. Like, the algorithm always feeds it to me. Oh, it is? Yeah. It's such a good movie. I think I'm not even a baseball fan. Like, I don't watch a lot of baseball, but man, the movie's so dang good. I think what I take from it resonates with me because of, Billy Beane. He was a failure. His playing career is considered a failure. And so he kind of took that and applied that to his GMing and found a different way to succeed. And so that story for me really resonates in terms of how I feel like how my career has gone. And so I'm hoping to reach Billy Beane's success, but I think it's an inspiring story and very well written. I've read Michael Lewis books, before that movie came out, so it was cool to see that as a movie. So yeah.
I'm a big baseball guy. It's just that baseball's always been my passion from the time I was very little, and so I followed the Oakland A's when that whole thing went down, and I remember that story all too well. I think Billy Beane would only hope that he was half as attractive as Brad Pitt was, though.
Don't we all?
Yeah, I know. Don't we all? Arman, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you having you on and sharing again your journey. And it was great talking to you. And we'll do it again. Certainly see you in Canton in about 6-8 weeks. Look forward to that. And I'll look forward to that drink. Look forward to
All
that
right.
time.
Thanks for having me on, Scott. It was wonderful to share my story, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you again. Appreciate
And
it.
as always, thanks everyone for listening. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode, and we'll see you next time under the hoodie.